okay, as you can see from the time. It's a couple of hours on now. A couple of schoolboy errors there. Just to talk through those, I tried to fasten the turbo to the bracket that fastens it to the block. I spent quite some time trying to do that before I realised I might have trouble getting the manifold back on. In fact, I wasted a considerable amount of time trying to get that bolt in, very awkward. So once come to my senses, fitted the manifold and then tightened the turbo up to the manifold, installing a new gasket in the process, and then the clamp for the block was pretty much lined up on its own, also making a point of checking that the oil drain back into the sump from the turbo was fitted as well. Forgot to fasten this heat shield on these bolts at the front on the EGR pipework, so that's had to be sorted out. Other than that, it's gone okay. Don't think there's anything else worthy of note. Tightened up the clamp at the front that I'd undone trying to loosen things off when I removed all the kit. That's sorted. I'm just going to check through the nuts and bolts that I've got remaining on the slam panel from the initial disassembly, just in case I've missed anything, and then come back to you on those. I've also, worthy of note, put the bonnet into access mode, which entails releasing these spring clips on the, I don't know if they're hydraulic or pneumatic arms, whichever they are. It normally rests here flush with this bar, and then the clip moves over these pins here and just slots over, and it secures the bonnet much higher up at a higher angle, which obviously makes it easier for accessing, throws more light in and made it easier getting down at the back. So there we are, the turbo's now fitted, the pipe work is pretty much fitted. I've got to fit the airbox and rocker cover back on first, the injectors will go in, the pipe work to the injectors and the inlet manifold, also setting up the, or should I say just bolting back on the EGR and the necessary pipe work there. So hopefully I'll come back to you shortly on that one, see how long that takes. That might be a job for tomorrow. It's another day. Come back to the car. You're probably wondering why I've got these bags over the engine bay. It's purely because overnight we've had some frost and a little bit of rain, and the vents are all removed, as I said earlier, from the back of the engine bay, and there's a chance that from the grill here and the vent that some moisture may come down and get into the engine, so I just made sure I covered up the engine bay there overnight. What I'll do first of all is I've had a look at a few of the clips from yesterday, just transferred them to the computer, and noticed that quite a few of the times the image I'm talking about will be slightly out of shot. Just to say that I'm using a mini spy camera, so I don't actually have a viewfinder, so I apologise for that, and it's certainly very handy for tucking around in the engine bay. Okay, just an update on where we've got to from yesterday then. As you can see, the rocker cover is now refitted and the injectors have been placed in. Let me just tuck this injector harness away out of the way a minute. Okay, so rocker cover's refitted, and all the bolts fastened down. All of the studs that the injectors mount on, they needed to actually be tightened into the block. That's worth remembering when you come to remove the rocker cover and take the injectors out, that the studs don't just hold the clamps for the injectors, they also clamp the rocker cover to the top of the block of the cylinder head, so you need to undo those. I'm just placed into position ready to be tightened up, the pipe work from the common rail to the injectors. Let's get that grass seed out of the way. and that's pretty much where we're at. There's a clamp at the back of the engine that's been refixed onto the rock cover assembly. That's actually holding the pipe work for the brake servo, so that needed refixing. Cover box, and I've yet to reaffix the intake pipe for the turbo back onto the turbo itself, and fit the screws back into the casing here. There's a job's yet to be done. Clipped in the sockets that needed clipping in, and I think that's about it since the last update. So hopefully today, fingers crossed, all being well, I'm going to get the inlet manifold back on, the pipe work back on, and shortly, as I say, all being well, we should be able to fire up the car, let it tick over for a while just to get the oil circulating around the turbo, and then take it for a run and see where we go from there. Okay, as you'll see, now got inlet manifolds on and secure, dipsticks reattached, wiring at the back's reattached, 10mm bolt there, 10mm bolt here, the banjo, the P-clip that holds on the servo pipework at the back, that's an Allen key bolt or a star key, Torx. I've not reassembled all the rubber grommets in here yet that cover, because when I start her up I want to check that there's no obvious leaks. I've put the trim back for the air vents, as you'll see at the back of the engine bay, and reconnected the main feed to the starter motor, the heavy feed. So hopefully in a moment we'll be able to start the car. Put the ignition on, hopefully we won't throw any engine faults, and wait for the diesel pump to do its stuff, to refill all the pipes. The injector leak offs have been reattached. It's a pipe that returns excess fuel back into the pump. You'll also notice these are held on by a little spring clip. When you disassemble these, you just need to pull these out slightly and then pull the hose up rather than disconnecting all the hoses. It all comes off in one piece. Okay, so here we are, ready to give it a try. Let's pop the ignition in, and hopefully the dash should light up as normal. So first stage, normal lights for the airbag, second stage for ignition. Okay, we've got low screen wash, oil pressure light is on, everything else is cleared. Parking lights come on, and that's my Bluetooth for my phone just kicking in, if you're wondering what the bleeping is. Just open the window, it's a little bit hot. Okay, when I start the engine I'm just going to fire it up and let it tick over without any revs at all, fingers crossed. Okay, so we're just showing HDC inactive there. Let's recycle the key. Obviously we're waiting on the fuel to prime up as well in the injectors, so we might need a little bit of cranking time. Okay, she's fired up. I'll let her tick over. Let that oil feed get into the turbo. That's not my car, that's the Resident Boy Racer pulling off. It's a little bit of smoke outside, that's obviously fingerprints from the turbo burning off. We'll go and have a look under the engine bay, see what's happening. Just going to shut her off now, check the dipstick again, see if there's been any noticeable decrease in the oil. Let's check on the dash again. Oil pressure is obviously still maintained, so that's encouraging. Ticking over nicely, no obvious problems. Don't know if you could hear me under the bonnet, but basically just looking around for any diesel spills that are coming off for the fuel rails and any obvious pooling of oil underneath the vehicle.